And you are live. We are Huang, and
And Heiko, and we're the Essence of Truth podcast.
which is all about the freedom and happiness that everybody wants but do not know how to get.
Exactly. And today we want to explore if your mind is actually telling you the truth, or if you're kind of living in an illusion, or you're perceiving things differently than they actually are. And this can play out in like very fun, positive ways, but also in very negative ways. And so we want to explore all of them. But most importantly, we want to get into how your brain kind of betrays you, why you're second guessing yourself, and how you can break free from that so you can move on with clarity and with confidence. And one thing that just came up as we were talking, Huang and I, was, for instance, like, I'm living in Vietnam currently, and there are some guys driving around like on motorbikes, and they're having on the back on their motorbikes, they have this interesting construction where they have like a little kind of cupboard with some raw dumplings in there, and then they have this little pot, like, just a metal kind of pot, where they put underneath, they put a little box with real fire going on as they are driving through the street, which in itself is just very interesting. But the funny thing is, they have this kind of radio speaker that just continuously is running around and just says like ban bao, something, something, right? It's Vietnamese. I'm not understanding it. Huang probably can can say that better. But so basically, ban bao is the steamed dumpling. And so it's basically just promoting it. And the funny thing is, for me, like now, after being here for more than a year and hearing that every day, like everything that's said in that radio speaker is in Vietnamese, but my brain starts to basically make something in English out of it. So I understand like ban bao today, ban bao is good every day, which has nothing to do with what it actually says. But the mind just searches for something relatable that it hears to basically give you an answer. Because every time I was hearing that, I was questioning myself, like, what is it? What are they saying? And so your brain, basically, or my brain, starts trying to figure out what it could be and just went with the sound. And I'm pretty sure you probably had sometimes certain songs that you were hearing where you heard something completely different than was actually sung. Or even when somebody tells you a name, like something that I often come across when I'm saying, like, hey, I'm Heiko, and somebody doesn't know me, or like comes from a different country where the name Heiko doesn't exist, their brain usually just links it to something else that they've heard. And in most cases, people repeat, like, oh, Michael. And I'm like, no, not Michael, Heiko. And then I kind of try to explain and give them a reference where they can then build a picture of, like, oh, okay, this is how you pronounce it. So it's all just these kind of funny ways where our brain tries to help us, but it can sometimes go in the wrong direction. And so, Wang, I think you have a very great example for these things.
Yeah, I actually have a couple and right now. When we're having a conversation, I actually share a different story. And right now, as I hear your story with the name, it reminds me of a different story. So I'm gonna share that right now, which is funny. I came from Vietnam, right? And there was a name. The name in Vietnam sometimes they are the same as the name in Netherlands. I didn't know that when I came here. And a friend of mine, which is one of my best friend, he have that name, and it's called Tem. Tem is how we pronounce it in Netherlands here, right? And in Vietnam, because it's written the same, so my pronunciation and my way of seeing that is very very different. And I come here and I speak it in a Vietnamese pronunciation in a way, so nobody understand me when they're asking about him, like where team. Oh yes, that's how we say in Vietnam, team very very different, and nobody understand that I was looking for this friend of mine until much later I discover, oh, so it's not team but it's tem, tem. And like, oh my god. So in our life, right, when we are in different places, and we move to a different country, as I am, the way that we see things and the way that we perceive things are very, very different. And in that way, it could create confusion. In this case, it was me and the other people. That's like I was looking for my friends, but I couldn't find them just because I didn't pronounce it right. It happened with many, many other things too. And so hmm, now we're gonna get lost in that story. Yeah.
Well, I love what you just shared because it's the perfect example also like when we mishear things, right? And I had exactly the same situation that you just described in so many different ways as well. Where I'm in the country, I'm looking on Google Maps where I want to go and I can't find it. So I'm asking someone, pronouncing whatever I think it's pronounced, and people are like, I have no idea. Then you show it to them, it's like, oh yeah, this and this. And the funny thing is, sometimes the way I pronounce it was very similar. It was just like this little notch different, but they still wouldn't get it, right? And what I've realized though, when while traveling for the past 8 years, is because when somebody kind of mispronounces something, I often still kind of get it because I kind of build with the context and things, right? And so I still kind of get what they mean. But for someone who doesn't travel and has no experience with people from other countries, where pronunciation, tone of voice, melody, everything can be different, they usually don't get it because in their circle, everyone says it exactly the same way. And it just shows to me like it's the references that our brain has, what is available to connect with another information to actually give it to us, right? And by now, like, I mean, I've talked to people from probably 20, 30 different countries. I have all these kind of references my brain can link to, where like, I think he means this. And then I can, see if it's correct or not. But I find it goes way further than just the things that we hear. Like one thing that I saw, it's years back, probably 10 years by now, but they made a test in Germany where they took some kind of food, I think it was some fruit or something like that, and they replicated. So they took a different kind of fruit, but they made it look like, or like another kind of fruit, doesn't really matter, but they took a different kind of food, made it look exactly like that with the colors and the shapes and the textures. The only thing they didn't change was the flavor. The flavor was still the original thing. And so they made three different kinds of that and then just gave it to people to test. And like, hey, like which one do you think tastes the best? We're just making a test here to test which flavor of this would be best. And so people were trying, and let's just say it's strawberry, and it's like, oh, this one is the best. And then they asked them, okay, like, did you notice anything? And they're like, yeah, well, this one is more sweet than the other. It's like nothing else. Like, oh, not really. And then they say, like, you didn't notice that this is actually whatever the other thing was. And they're like, no. And then they let them try again, and then they actually tasted it
Mm-hmm.
because before they it looked like what they thought it looked like strawberry, right? They thought
Mm-hmm.
it is, they believed it is, and so the brain actually just took a memory of how it tasted to analyze it instead of actually getting the flavor here. And
Mm-hmm.
so then after, when they knew what it was, this is when they actually started to analyze what they are tasting there. And so it's so interesting how it can influence us, even just like right now. If you just close your eyes for a second and you just imagine you're having like a cut open half a slice of lemon in your left hand, and you're squeezing it a little bit, you're touching it with your fingertips, and you feel like the texture, right? You feel like the waxy oily kind of skin, and you just imagine you're holding it in front of your nose, and you take the brief the smell of the lemon, because nothing quite smells like a lemon, right? And then you imagine you're taking a bite into it, and you're biting in the flesh, and you have all the juices going into your mouth. Like, what's happening right now as you're imagining that is your mouth is producing saliva. There is no real lemon, but your mind makes it real. And so this is very so fascinating for me, like the power of our mind. But we often don't consciously use that. And I think, Huang, you also even had a different example for how it's visually impacting us, what we are seeing around us, right?
Yeah, yeah. I actually there was a story about a movie, and I'm making it short now. Practically, when this shaman was guiding this woman, right, and to see things, But then in the beginning, she wasn't able to see to perceive this, this ship on the far side as at all. But after, after being activated, after being pointed out, then she's like, oh my God, suddenly her mind's open, right? And she can see the ship on the, very, very far away from the sea. The same thing for us. Well, I would say for me, in the beginning when I go to the Netherlands, right, I couldn't, of course, the language, right? I couldn't speak the language, and so when people say and talk in the language, I was able to perceive that as well. But afterward, when I start to learn the language even better, I start to recognize, oh, like also this mean this, and then I started to perceive so much more, and that's auditory, right? And the visual, it was about the well, my car, which is a Toyota Yaris. Before that, and that is what we're talking about. Before that, before I have that car, I don't see it anywhere at all. Maybe I didn't care enough, and afterward, after I have that, I'm like, it's like automatic. It just scan automatic, and in that way, I see it everywhere. Just like wow, so there are so much more of these Toyota Yaris than I had perceived before, which is so interesting, right? In our daily life, how many things that we actually missed, maybe visually, right? Maybe like from the sounds, which is auditory, maybe from the smell, right, or the taste. So through all of those things, let's talk about opportunities, right, or traps that we stay entrapped within because of the illusions of our mind, right, and opportunities which help us get out of the trap. That's what make financials, right, the great financial, they recognize opportunities in business, right, and people that are sensitive picking up on the emotions of people or of themselves, of the energy and so on. So yeah, in the end, how do we find out that we are like in the illusions of our mind, and how do we expand that further? Well, I will hallucinate that it is through becoming so aware, right? Through either having someone else guide us, and through self-questioning, like, is it possible, like that I could be wrong? Is it possible that it is there, right, or not? And by concentrating, right, by focusing in that way, we ask questions, we explore more. And that is kind of how I explore more about emotions and about, other things like skill set, like many of us, and I bet you do that like a lot as well. And with your travel, right? You're talking about travel in that way, you expand your insight, you expand your perception, you expand that world that you have in there, which is very, very amazing, by the way.
Thanks so much, brother.
Mm,
And I love what you just shared, because like also that you brought it into the area of emotions and energy, because I find this is affecting, like, definitely affected me, but also affected a lot of other people in different kind of scenarios, right? You said in the financial realm, but I also see it a lot, especially in relationships,
yes.
where like you're, especially when you have like your own insecurities, you're overthinking about stuff, right? You're second guessing yourself, and you're looking a lot outside of, like, how you are perceived by others. Oh, what if I fail? What if I do this wrong? And you take a lot of energy and focus on how you look like and how you're presenting yourself, just to be accepted, right? And to fit in into whatever environment you're trying to belong to. And what I find often is that we don't just make this about our reality and the illusion we basically live in, but we also include especially our partner in that as well. Where in German we have this word where we say Fremdschämen. It's basically mean like you're feeling shame for somebody else. Like, if,
Mm,
let's just say, you're trying all to do to be perfect, you took a lot of care of yourself, you pay a lot of attention how you articulate yourself and gestures, but then maybe the person you're with doesn't do that, or behaves in a certain kind of way that that's like, maybe you shouldn't do that right now, because you're focusing on what would other people think about this, and because you are with that person, what would they think about you? And so you create this whole inner emotional conflict, where actually you don't even know what others think. Maybe they like what this kind of person does, because everybody just tries to fit in, and they are just loosening up and having a good time. And so It's all perception. And if there are 10 people, those 10 people will see differently again based on their experiences, their insecurities. And so, one thing that I find very important is that we really explore our insecurities and what we're bringing into it. Because it's not just affecting us, but it's then also affecting our relationships and how we perceive and interact with the people that we actually really care and love in our lives. And so this is where then often comes in where you start judging the other person. You're looking for flaws in them, or you start negging or kind of all these kind of things because you feel like they shouldn't behave this kind of way in this kind of environment. When in reality, it's your own insecurity. And I'm honest. I was that way too, and I had to put a lot of work on myself to fix that. But I can also then now say from experience that it can be completely different, where it can be completely in love and okay with however the other person shows up, giving them the freedom to be whoever they want to be like. Because at the end, this is what you want too, right? And so it's such a relief when you then really you stop caring what others may perceive or may not, and you start living, accepting yourself and accepting those around you. And I find this is tremendously lifting in so many ways. Like, I don't know, do you have an experience like that?
I really love what you say like that, right? From the place, instead of staying from the place of projection and insecurity, and I've been there like many times, and when I'm not aware of that, right, and or not aware of my own emotional state or how I feel, and then it slip in like so much faster than when we are aware it's facts, and also with our habits as well. Building habits will allow us to literally strong habit will allow us to fall back into like, oh yeah, like that habit. So I believe, as I was hearing you saying, something comes across my mind that, in expansion lies our freedom. That sentence, because when you expand yourself, your consciousness and your awareness, and as you are traveling, right, like many countries, over 20 countries, right, or over 8 years, and it's with that, right, you must have experienced a lot of different things, and in those experiences, they themselves created so much more insight, right, for you. Your world expand, that, oh, it's not just, it could be like this, but it could also be like that. And every time that it could be like that, you expand your world even more and more, right? And with that expansion is broadened your creativity, right? Your compassion, your acceptance, right? And also, your ways to connecting with people as well, which is so important in this, in this day and age. uh, and that we can share that, and in that connection we can share for the next generation as well. So yeah, by expanding ourselves like that, by asking ourselves questions to break free of the trap of the illusions, right? As you did and as I had to do, and it's all stemmed from a place of, well, literally pain. Like I was so judgmental to myself first, and then I projected to other people, and when I project into other people, I receive the same thing back, which is kind of funny how life works, right? They either receive it back, or they walk away. So the good people will walk away, and and the one that, well, don't take it, they don't take it. So it's, and until I changed my mind, I changed it my way, right, and I expanded my world. That is when the true freedom lies. So yeah, as you were sharing, that was the thought I hear. In expansion lies our freedom.
And I loved it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Also, thanking you for being so open and vulnerable about it, because I think this is very important, especially when we talk about these topics where we're diving into ourselves and the insecurities and things. And what I really want to highlight here is the expansion and the freedom that you said comes from it, because I totally agree. Because back then, when I first of had this dream of traveling the world, like this was the definition of freedom for me. But like now, where I'm traveling for 8.5 years, I realized that true freedom starts within. because many times along this journey, I have been in amazing locations, but I could still, when things happening, life was happening, business was happening, I could still feel trapped within myself, didn't feel the freedom. And it took something to shake me out of this when I'm realizing, man, you're living in this amazing location, you're having this amazing life other people dream about. Wake up. Right? And this is where the expansion comes from. All these, I mean, of course, traveling allowed me to have all these experiences to grow in different kind of ways and getting more references. But at the end, it always comes from within and how I'm perceiving the world right now. And I've noticed, and thank you for sharing that when you say like you're using questions to get out of the illusion. And I noticed like sometimes I'm just walking somewhere, and I remember that was like 2 years ago. I was walking across a bridge in Canada, and I remember like in spring, where like you far in the on the horizon, you could see the snow-capped mountains. It was a beautiful day, right? I was just walking there and like having the time of my life, feeling in bliss, just enjoying everything as it is. But then in that moment, as I'm walking around there, I actually noticed like, wait a minute, I'm not even really here. I'm stuck in my head thinking about stuff. And literally just asking myself one thing, even just something like that, hey, what can I appreciate about this right now? And you just stop, you breathe, and you look around you and you realize all those things. And I love that you're literally doing it right now. But you start realizing all those things and you start seeing the colors, the trees. You start hearing the river under the bridge, right? You're hearing the birds or whatever kind of things, and you're living in the moment again. So one key element that I got from that is expansion, being in the present, and using directive questions to get you out of the illusion. And now I'm very interested what your approach to that is, because you do a lot of this kind of work as well.
Mm, mm. For me, it's literally taking a deep breath, right? And and reconnecting with myself again is how I call it. And it's connecting to my own heartbeat, right? And my own breathing and my own heartbeat and the energy within me, which is, I say it like that, but practically it's our blood, right? See, like how we feel emotionally and that whole thing. Um, and in that way I then notice the shift, right? Hey, is this doing something to me? Is this something doing something with me? And in that way become more aware, right? And asking question and diving deeper in could also be something else, because inside of us there are, right now I can think of, there are two things that happen, right? We either gonna feel like or we can feel like the that means we can let it go, we can be like acceptance. And the that means like, no, I don't accept that. It's like, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna use that word. It's like constipation, right? When we consume and we don't when we don't get it out, then we screw. It won't be good for us. I also been there too, so it's not pretty. So the same thing for breathing in, right? So exhale, breathing out. The same thing for the illusions that we have. When it's trapped, then well, it's not gonna be pretty for us, and many other diseases will happen inside of us too. But when we can let go, or we find acceptance and let go, that means we can become one, and we can allow the energy to flow again. At least that is how I see it. That is how what my thoughts are. And of course, by expanding our world, by expanding ourselves in there, right, we can handle more, we can see more, we can do so much more. And it's all, I really love what you say, right? Begin from within. It's absolutely true. It's all starting from within. Yeah.
Exactly. Coming to the essence of truth, right?
Yeah.
And I love what you just shared with like this, oh, when we're resisting it, or this, we're
Ah.
opening, we're accepting it. Because I also find this fits really well into confidence as well. Because often you're feeling, oh, confidence is hard power, pushing through things. But I also find like when you're in this state of like, acceptance, then you can be extremely confident You can calm confidence without this aggressive kind of pushing energy. Because when you're living in accepting yourself, loving life, and whatever opportunity or task you're going into, then it's a different kind of confidence and of energy that you bring into it, I find. And oftentimes I find it is that energy which makes it easier for me, because the other one's like, yeah, I can push through, but I can get things done, but I'm very narrow focused, rather than when I have this expansive confidence. Then I'm start seeing things like, oh, I didn't notice this before. I can use that to solve my problem right now, right? I can ask this person for help, or I can, all these opportunities that we often have, but don't realize the resources that we have, but don't utilize. And so I love that you shared that. And it ties so perfectly into being present, expansion, right? And taking this breath. And it gives it to me this whole different kind of confidence and of energy and of clarity.
Yeah, yeah. Confident clarity, because when we are too much out there, we ourselves are, I'll say it, through our many coaches, it has different name. I call it, the balance. And of course, nobody want balance, right? Practically, do you know that balance is actually power? Right? Do you know that you cannot walk, right? The very first thing as a child before you can walk is you have to have balance, the standing up balance, right? And after that, before you can run, you have to have that balance, right? Stable. Another different word is stable, stability. And after, it's the same thing with using the bicycle, which is the first tool to expand our travel speed, right? For children. I remember the first time when I, learning to drive a bicycle is like, and I'm to the left, to the right. So yeah, the balance is something that we have to maintain. Uh, Physically in that way to learn and to travel at all. What about our internal, emotional balance? What about our mental balance, which is connecting to the emotional, right? Could we do anything at all when, how much productive, how much power will be in what we do when we just, like totally in a different place in our head, our emotions like on the other side, we are being tear apart, right? So the balance is practically how closer are you to your core.
I love how you put that into words. How close you are to your core, right? The essence of truth and how you're acting on it. Like also, like I think it fits very well. One keyword that usually has been used nowadays a lot is like alignment. I think it fits in there perfectly as well. When you're in alignment, you're in balance, you're close to your core, and it's
Yeah.
so much easier to see beyond the illusions, beyond your insecurities, beyond to, hey, what do other people think about me? And you're the first looking into, what do I actually see about me? Because one thing that blew my mind when I first heard about it was, like anytime you're wondering what other people might judge about you, you're judging yourself, because you're looking at something on yourself that you don't like. So it doesn't even matter what anybody else out there says, because you already did it to yourself. And so this to me blew my mind, and it made me realize, coming back to, starting to seeing the truth, that I was judging myself a lot. And I was so much away from my core, so out of balance. And so coming back to it really allowed me then to perceive the world the way I do. And like also coming back to the decision of traveling the world, I had to come to this core of me to actually make the decision, because I put off this decision for 15 years. And so this is so important. And I really want to thank you for sharing that. And I think, we talked about so many things in different areas here, but coming to the truth of it, for me at least, it's really there's expansion and coming to your core, like basically expanding from your core, so to speak. I think this is what I want to take out of this session today, because for me, as I'm reflecting on my life, and I'm just doing that right now as I'm talking, as once I got into my core, or at least close to my core. And I started expanding, right? This is where I got the confidence to actually make the decision to quit my job and start traveling the world. This is when I started to expand. And then from that, going to further countries, going into new kind of jobs, eventually starting my business. Like all of this came from being in my core and trusting myself that I can expand, right? That I can get out of my comfort zone and I'm okay doing that. And so I think this is the key point that I want to take away from this today. And I'm curious, what is it for you?
Well, for me, when I was hearing you sharing, that within, right? It starts from within, and that makes me think, and let's create the takeaway, is that our expansion is all start from within. First and foremost, inside of us, right? We're expanding from there further out, and to become aware of the illusion that we could be trapped in, right? And allowed it to continue further. And I love that you share that. So thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome.
Mm.
And also, I'm curious about you guys. Like, no matter if you're watching or listening to this, like, what were your key takeaways from this today? Or do you have any thoughts, insights, stories, or questions that you would like to share with us? Because we want to hear your stories, we want to hear your insights and the questions that you have. Also, if you have any kind of topic that you would like us to cover in a future episode, let us know because we're doing this for you. We want to co create this space with you. And so, any feedback, anything you want to share with us is very much appreciated. And so, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching or for listening. I'm out, and I just want to say remember who you are.
And remember the power of creation you possess, guys. All right. And yeah, also remember to get out of the illusion. All
Get
right.
out of the illusion.
Yes. Take care,
Take
guys.
care, guys.
Bye.